I'm standing in the grocery store holding a carton of eggs that costs $8.15. $8 for 12 eggs. That's like 68 cents per egg. I remember when my first job paid me $8 an hour, and now that's what a dozen eggs costs. And I'm doing this mental math that I never used to have to do. Like, do I really need eggs this week? Can I make the recipes I planned without them? But then I think, what if the price goes up even more next week? What if this is the cheapest they're going to be? So I'm standing here with this $8 carton of eggs, and my total grocery bill is already at $130, and I haven't even gotten everything on my list. And the news keeps saying the economy is great, inflation is down, everything is fine, but I can't afford to buy food. And then I start spiraling about whether I'm just bad with money. Like, maybe everyone else figured out how to adapt to these prices, and I'm the only one struggling. Maybe I should have been smarter, saved more, planned better. Maybe this is just what being an adult costs now, and I need to deal with it.
Emily, you're not bad with money. I'm having the same panic, but about insurance. My company just announced they're changing our health plan, and my out-of-pocket maximum is going from $3,000 to $7,000. $7,000? That's more than I have in my entire savings account. So if I get sick, if I need surgery, if anything major happens, I'm basically choosing between my health and financial ruin.
That's terrifying.
And they're cutting other benefits too. They're not contributing as much to our retirement plan anymore. They're reducing the company match for our 401k. Meanwhile, they keep telling us how great the company is doing, how record profits mean we should all be grateful to have jobs. But I'm looking at my paycheck, and after rent and student loans and utilities, I have maybe $200 a month left over. And that's supposed to cover groceries, gas, any emergency that comes up, plus somehow save for retirement and build an emergency fund.
You two are worried about eggs and insurance? I'm worried about not having a job at all. Half the people in my department got laid off last month because they're replacing us with AI systems.
Are you serious?
Dead serious. And it's not just my company, it's everywhere. They keep saying unemployment is low, but they're not counting all the people whose jobs just disappeared. They're not counting the gig workers who can't find enough work to survive.
But I thought AI was supposed to help people, not replace them.
That's what they told us. That AI would handle the boring tasks and free us up for more creative work. Instead, they're just firing half the staff and making the remaining people work twice as hard to pick up the slack. And the government jobs that used to be stable. They're cutting those too. Thousands of federal workers getting fired or having their positions eliminated. So even the jobs that were supposed to be recession-proof aren't safe anymore.
So we can't afford food, can't afford health care, and might not have jobs. This is fine.
And meanwhile, every politician and news anchor is telling us how great everything is, how the economy is booming, how we should be grateful, how things have never been better.
Right. They're showing us statistics about how inflation is down, but they're not counting food and housing costs. They're saying unemployment is low, but they're not counting people who gave up looking for work or whose jobs were eliminated entirely.
It's like they're living in a completely different reality than we are.
And it makes me feel crazy. Like, am I the only one who can't afford basic necessities? Am I the only one panicking about medical bills? Because according to the news, everyone should be doing great right now.
And if you complain about any of this, people act like you're being dramatic or ungrateful. Like you should just be happy to have a job, even if it doesn't pay enough to live. Happy to have insurance, even if you can't afford to use it.
But what are we supposed to do? Just accept that this is how life is now? That we'll never be able to afford the things our parents took for granted?
Like owning a house, or having kids, or retiring someday. Those all feel like impossible luxuries now.
And the worst part is, I don't think it's going to get better. I think this is the new normal. High prices, low wages, no job security, no social safety net.
My friend started keeping chickens in her backyard just so she could have eggs without paying these insane prices. But now she's worried about bird flu because if her chickens get sick, she could lose everything she's invested in them.
That's such a perfect metaphor for where we are. You try to solve one problem and you create 3 new ones.
Exactly. You try to save money on groceries, but now you're risking disease exposure. You try to keep your health insurance, but now you can't afford to actually use it. You try to keep your job, but AI is making your position obsolete.
So we're all just stuck in this cycle of trying to survive financially while being told we should be grateful for the opportunity.
And feeling like failures for not being able to make it work.
When really, the system is set up to make it impossible for most people to succeed.
But saying that out loud makes you sound like a conspiracy theorist or a complainer.
Even though it's just describing what's actually happening in our lives.
Right, we're not making this up. We're just trying to pay for food and housing and healthcare like normal human beings.
And apparently that's too much to ask for in 2025.
So what do we do? Just accept that we're going to be financially stressed forever?
I honestly don't know, but I know that pretending everything is fine isn't working.
Okay, if you just listened to that and you're now calculating how many hours you'd have to work to afford a dozen eggs, we feel your pain, and we're sorry for adding to your financial anxiety math.
Hi everyone, I'm Cora, and yes, I just admitted that my insurance out-of-pocket maximum is higher than my entire savings account. Living the American dream over here.
I'm Gianna, and I'm currently watching my job category get systematically replaced by artificial intelligence while being told I should be grateful for the opportunity to work harder for the same pay.
And I'm Emily, professional grocery store calculator who now treats the supermarket like a high-stakes game show where every decision could break my budget. Welcome to What Me Worry, Episode 7, where we explore the special kind of anxiety that comes from being financially squeezed while being told everything is fine.
Before we dive deeper, we should mention again what our listeners keep telling us, that coming back to these episodes has been helping them recognize their anxiety patterns and build new ways of thinking about these situations.
Right, because when you hear the same spirals repeatedly, your brain starts to see them as patterns instead of just getting caught up in the panic every time.
So if you find yourself re-listening to these, that's actually your brain doing therapeutic work. It's learning to recognize and manage anxiety in real time.
Okay, back to our collective financial doom. The thing about what just happened is that we were all panicking about very real, very current economic pressures while also feeling gaslit by the messaging we're getting about how everything is supposedly great.
Right, like this isn't us catastrophizing about imaginary problems. Eggs really do cost $8. Health insurance really is getting more expensive. Jobs really are being eliminated.
But somehow talking about these real problems makes us feel like we're being negative or ungrateful because the official narrative is that the economy is booming.
And that creates this weird double anxiety where you're stressed about money and also stressed about being stressed about money.
Like, am I struggling because I'm bad at life, or am I struggling because things have genuinely gotten harder to afford?
And that uncertainty makes everything worse because you don't know if you should be adapting to a new normal or fighting for something better.
Plus, when you're spending all your mental energy trying to figure out how to afford basic necessities, you don't have bandwidth left over for long-term planning or self-care or enjoying life.
Right. It's hard to think about your career goals when you're calculating whether you can afford both groceries and gas this week.
So today we're going to talk about financial anxiety in a time when the gap between economic messaging and lived reality feels bigger than ever.
We'll explore how to manage money stress when you can't actually solve the money problems.
And we'll talk about the difference between legitimate financial concerns and anxiety-driven catastrophizing about money.
Plus, we'll hear from Alexander from Arizona, who's been avoiding opening his credit card statements for 3 months because he's afraid of what he'll find.
But first, let's acknowledge that financial anxiety is different from other kinds of anxiety because money problems are often very real and very urgent.
Right. Like when we were spiraling about apocalyptic scenarios or missing cats, those were mostly anxiety-creating imaginary problems. But not being able to afford rent is an actual problem that requires actual solutions.
So the challenge becomes figuring out which parts of our financial stress are based on real circumstances that need addressing, and which parts are anxiety making those circumstances feel even more overwhelming.
And how to take practical action on the real problems without getting paralyzed by the anxiety.
Because anxiety tends to make everything feel equally urgent and catastrophic, even when some problems are more solvable than others.
Like, I can't control the price of eggs, but I can control how much mental energy I spend calculating egg prices in the grocery store.
And I can't control my company's insurance changes, but I can control whether I spend all day, every day, worrying about what might happen if I get sick.
Right. And I can't control whether AI eliminates my job category, but I can control whether I spend every workday panicking about it instead of focusing on what I can actually do.
So it's about finding the balance between taking real problems seriously and not letting anxiety turn them into consuming obsessions.
Which is really hard when the problems are genuinely stressful and the solutions aren't obvious.
And when you're getting mixed messages about whether your experience is normal or whether you're just doing something wrong.
Right. Like, if everyone else is managing fine with these prices and job market changes, then maybe I'm the problem.
But if lots of people are struggling, then maybe the system is the problem, not us individually.
And figuring out which one it is affects how you respond to the stress.
So maybe part of managing financial anxiety is getting clearer about what's actually within our control versus what's happening to everyone.
And learning to take action on the things we can influence without torturing ourselves about the things we can't.
Even when the things we can't influence are really significant and scary.
Because torturing ourselves doesn't make us any better at solving the actual problems.
And it uses up energy we need for dealing with real financial challenges.
So the goal isn't to stop being concerned about money. The goal is to be concerned about money in ways that actually help instead of just making everything harder.
Let's talk about the difference between having legitimate financial concerns and letting anxiety turn those concerns into all-consuming spirals that actually make it harder to deal with money problems.
Right, because when I'm standing in the grocery store doing price calculations, some of that is practical budgeting and some of that is anxiety brain making every purchase decision feel life or death.
And when I'm worried about AI taking my job, some of that is reasonable career planning, and some of that is catastrophic thinking about becoming unemployable and ending up homeless.
So, how do you tell the difference? Because both the practical concerns and the anxiety spirals feel really urgent in the moment.
I think practical financial planning leads to specific actions. Like, I need to save more money, so I'm going to cut back on eating out and look for a cheaper phone plan.
But anxiety spirals lead to general panic without clear solutions. Like, the economy is collapsing and I'm going to lose everything and there's nothing I can do about it.
That's a good distinction. One is focused on problems you can actually address, and the other is focused on catastrophic scenarios you can't control.
But what if the catastrophic scenarios are actually possible? Like, what if I do get sick and can't afford the medical bills?
I think that's where you have to separate planning for realistic possibilities from obsessing over worst-case scenarios.
What's the difference?
Like, realistic planning would be researching your insurance coverage, setting aside money for your deductible if possible, looking into payment plans for medical bills.
And obsessing would be spending hours every day imagining specific medical emergencies and calculating exactly how each one would bankrupt me.
Right. One is taking practical steps based on general risk, and the other is creating detailed disaster scenarios that may never happen.
Plus, the obsessing doesn't actually prepare you any better for real medical emergencies. It just makes you feel terrible in advance.
That's true. When I spend all day worrying about hypothetical medical bills, I'm not actually doing anything useful to improve my situation.
Same with my job anxiety. Constantly imagining AI replacing me doesn't make me any more prepared for job loss. It just makes me miserable at my current job.
So maybe the question is, what actions can I take that would actually improve my financial situation or resilience?
Like building an emergency fund, even if it's tiny, learning new skills that might make me more employable, researching cheaper alternatives for things I'm currently spending money on.
Right, and those are all things I can do regardless of whether the worst case scenarios actually happen.
Exactly. Because if the economy does collapse or AI does take all the jobs or healthcare costs to bankrupt everyone, having some savings and skills won't hurt.
And if those things don't happen, you're still better off for having prepared.
But there's a limit to how much preparing is actually helpful, right? Like, at some point you've done what you can do, and additional worrying doesn't add value.
Right. Like, I can shop around for cheaper grocery stores and plan meals around sales, but I can't control the price of eggs or the inflation rate.
And I can research my insurance options and save money where possible, but I can't control whether my company changes the benefits or whether I get sick.
So maybe the goal is to do the things that are actually within your control and then try to let go of the things that aren't.
Which sounds simple but is really hard when the things outside your control could have major impacts on your life.
Right. Like, I logically know that worrying about egg prices doesn't change egg prices, but it feels irresponsible to just not think about it.
Because anxiety brain treats worrying like it's the same as doing something productive about the problem.
When really, worrying and problem solving are completely different activities.
What do you mean?
Like, problem solving is looking at your budget, identifying areas where you could cut expenses, researching cheaper alternatives, making a plan for how to handle specific scenarios.
And worrying is just repeating, what if I can't afford things, over and over without actually gathering new information or taking any action.
So problem solving moves you forward and worrying just keeps you stuck in the same anxious loop.
Right. And anxiety brain loves to disguise worrying as problem solving so it feels productive and necessary.
Like, I'll spend an hour reading articles about AI job displacement and tell myself I'm being proactive, when really I'm just feeding my anxiety.
Same with reading about healthcare costs or housing prices. It feels like research, but it's actually just making me more stressed without giving me actionable information.
So maybe we need to get better at distinguishing between information gathering that leads to action and information gathering that just feeds anxiety.
How do you do that?
I think you ask yourself, what am I going to do differently based on this information? If the answer is nothing, then it's probably anxiety feeding rather than actual planning.
That's helpful. Like, reading about my insurance changes so I can budget for higher costs is useful. Reading horror stories about people going bankrupt from medical bills is just scary.
And researching skills that are in demand in my field is useful. Reading predictions about which jobs AI will eliminate next is just terrifying.
Right. And when you catch yourself doing the anxiety feeding version, you can redirect to the actual planning version.
Or just stop consuming that information altogether if it's not leading to useful action.
But what about the big picture stuff? Like, shouldn't we be informed about economic trends and policy changes?
I think there's a difference between staying generally informed and obsessively tracking every economic indicator.
Like, knowing that inflation is affecting food prices is useful context. Checking food price indexes every day is probably not helpful for your mental health.
And knowing that automation is changing the job market is useful for career planning. Constantly reading about robot job apocalypse scenarios is just anxiety fuel.
Plus, most of the really big economic and political stuff is happening at a level where individual actions don't have much impact anyway.
What do you mean?
Like, I can vote and stay informed about policy, but I can't personally control inflation rates or trade policies or corporate decisions about automation.
So focusing too much on that level of economic analysis is actually a distraction from the things I can control, like my own skills and spending and saving.
Right. And it can make you feel helpless and overwhelmed instead of empowered to take action on your own situation.
So maybe the key is to zoom in on the financial decisions and actions that are actually within your control, instead of getting lost in the big picture economic trends.
Even when those big picture trends are genuinely concerning and relevant to your life.
Because you can acknowledge that they exist without making them the center of your daily mental energy.
Right. Like, I can know that food prices are high without spending my grocery shopping time spiraling about inflation policy.
And I can know that automation is changing the job market without spending my workday panicking about being replaced.
It's about staying informed without staying obsessed. Let's talk about something that makes financial anxiety even worse: the shame that comes with struggling financially when you're supposed to be a functioning adult.
Oh God, yes. Like, I feel embarrassed that I can't afford $8 eggs without doing mental math. Shouldn't I have my finances together enough that grocery prices don't stress me out?
And I feel like a failure for being worried about job security. Like, maybe if I was more skilled or more valuable, I wouldn't have to worry about being replaced by AI.
Right? There's this underlying message that if you're financially stressed, it's because you made bad choices or didn't work hard enough or didn't plan properly.
Which makes you feel like you can't talk about money problems without admitting that you're irresponsible or incompetent.
And that isolation makes the anxiety worse because you don't know if what you're experiencing is normal or if you're uniquely messing up.
Plus, social media makes it seem like everyone else has their financial life figured out. People posting about vacations and new purchases and home ownership like it's no big deal.
When really you have no idea what anyone else's actual financial situation is. They could be going into debt for those vacations or living paycheck to paycheck despite appearing successful.
Right. We only see people's financial highlights, not their struggles with bills or debt or job insecurity.
And there's still this cultural narrative that anyone can succeed financially if they just try hard enough, which makes struggling feel like a personal moral failing.
Like, if you can't afford a house, it's because you're spending too much on avocado toast, not because housing prices have increased faster than wages for decades.
Or if you're worried about job security, it's because you're not keeping up with technology, not because entire industries are being restructured in ways that prioritize profit over employment.
So you end up blaming yourself for problems that are much bigger than individual choices.
And that self-blame doesn't help you solve the financial problems. It just adds an extra layer of stress and shame.
Right. Like, beating myself up for being anxious about AI doesn't make me any more prepared for job market changes.
And feeling ashamed of my insurance anxiety doesn't make healthcare any more affordable.
So maybe we need to separate the practical financial challenges from the shame and self-judgment about having those challenges.
How do you do that, though? The shame feels automatic.
I think it helps to remember that financial stress is incredibly common right now, even among people who are doing everything right.
What do you mean?
Like, people with college degrees and stable jobs are still struggling with housing costs and healthcare expenses and student loan debt. It's not just people who made bad financial choices.
Right. When the cost of basic necessities goes up faster than wages, that's a systemic problem, not a personal failure.
And when companies eliminate positions to increase profits, that's a business decision, not a reflection of your individual worth or competence.
So maybe the question isn't, why can't I handle my finances better, but how do I cope with financial stress in a challenging economic environment?
That reframe actually makes it feel less personal and shameful.
Right. Like, I'm not failing at life. I'm dealing with a difficult situation that lots of people are dealing with.
And that makes it easier to focus on practical solutions instead of getting stuck in self-criticism.
Plus, it makes it easier to ask for help or advice when you need it because you're not carrying around shame about needing help.
That's huge. I've been avoiding talking to my parents about money stuff because I don't want them to think I'm irresponsible.
But they might actually have useful advice or perspective, especially since they've lived through different economic challenges.
And they might be more understanding than you think. Like, they probably remember times when they were financially stressed too.
That's true. I always think of them as having everything figured out, but they were probably struggling when they were my age too.
Right. And the things that worked for them might not work now because the economic landscape has changed, but they might still understand the stress.
Plus, talking about money challenges openly makes it easier for other people to share their struggles too, which reduces everyone's isolation and shame.
Like, if I admit that I'm worried about medical bills, maybe my friends will admit they're worried about the same thing, and we can brainstorm solutions together.
Instead of everyone pretending they have it all figured out while secretly panicking about the same issues.
Right. Because chances are, if you're struggling with something, other people are too.
And there might be resources or strategies that you don't know about, but other people do.
Like, maybe someone knows about assistance programs or cheaper alternatives or ways to negotiate bills that you hadn't thought of.
Or maybe someone has practical experience with job searching or career transitions that could be helpful.
But you only get access to that information if you're willing to be honest about what you're dealing with.
Which requires getting past the shame and judgment about having financial challenges in the first place.
And remembering that needing help with money stuff doesn't make you weak or irresponsible.
It just makes you human, living in a time when financial security is harder to achieve than it used to be.
And when a lot of the traditional advice about money doesn't match current economic realities.
Like, just save more money doesn't help when your rent takes up 60% of your income.
Or just get a better job doesn't help when entire job categories are being eliminated or when entry-level positions require years of experience.
So maybe instead of shame about not following advice that doesn't work anymore, we can focus on strategies that actually match the current situation.
Even if those strategies are imperfect or not, what we thought adult financial life would look like.
Right. Like having roommates in your 30s or buying generic everything or choosing between different types of insurance coverage.
Those might not be ideal long-term solutions, but they're practical responses to current circumstances.
And there's no shame in adapting to reality instead of pretending everything is fine when it's not.
Or in acknowledging that some financial challenges are genuinely difficult and stressful, even when you're handling them as well as you can.
Time for our guest segment, where we talk to someone dealing with their own financial anxiety spiral. Today, we're talking to Alexander from Arizona. Alexander, thanks for calling in.
Hey, thanks for having me. So my situation is that I haven't opened my credit card statements in 3 months because I'm terrified of what I'll find.
Oh, that's such a classic avoidance response to financial stress. Tell us what's been going through your head about those statements.
Well, I know I've been using my credit cards more than usual because everything is so expensive. But I keep telling myself I'll deal with it later, and now later has turned into 3 months, and I'm convinced I've racked up thousands of dollars in debt.
So you're avoiding the information because you're afraid it'll be worse than you think?
Exactly. Like, as long as I don't look, I can pretend it might not be that bad. But if I open those statements and see huge balances, then I have to face the reality that I'm in serious financial trouble.
But not knowing isn't actually protecting you from the debt, right? The balances are what they are, whether you look at them or not.
I know that logically. But emotionally, looking at the statements feels like it would make the problem real in a way that's overwhelming.
And meanwhile, you're probably imagining worse scenarios than what's actually there.
Oh, definitely. In my head, I owe like $15,000 and I'm about to lose my house and ruin my credit forever.
Which might be way worse than the actual situation, but you won't know until you look.
Right? And the longer I avoid looking, the more dramatic my imagined scenarios become.
This is such a perfect example of how anxiety makes practical problems worse. You have a real financial issue that needs attention, but the anxiety about it is preventing you from getting the information you need to address it.
So, what should I do? Just rip the Band-Aid off and look at everything at once?
That's one approach, but it might be overwhelming. What if you started smaller?
Like how?
Maybe look at just one statement first, or even just log into one account online to see the current balance without looking at all the details.
Right. Get the basic information without drowning yourself in 3 months of transaction details all at once.
That sounds less terrifying. But what if it's really bad?
Then you'll know what you're actually dealing with instead of imagining scenarios that might be worse than reality.
And once you know the real numbers, you can start making a plan to address them.
Plus, there might be options you don't know about, like payment plans or balance transfer options or ways to negotiate with the credit card companies.
I hadn't thought about that. I was just assuming that if I owe a lot of money, I'm screwed.
But that's anxiety brain thinking in all or nothing terms. There are usually options between everything is fine and complete financial ruin.
Right? Even if you do owe more than you'd like, that's a problem you can work on solving rather than a permanent disaster.
So you think I should look at the statements this week?
What do you think? How does it feel when you imagine actually knowing your balances instead of just guessing?
Scary, but also kind of relieving. Like, at least then I'd know what I'm dealing with.
And you could stop spending mental energy on imagining worst-case scenarios and start spending it on actual problem solving.
That's true. I've been so stressed about the unknown debt that I haven't been thinking clearly about my spending or budgeting.
Right. The avoidance is actually making it harder to manage your finances responsibly going forward.
Okay, I'm going to look at them. Maybe not all at once, but I'll start with one account and see how it goes.
We're proud of you for being willing to face the reality instead of staying stuck in avoidance. That takes courage.
Thanks. I think I needed to hear that this is a normal response to financial stress and not just me being irresponsible.
All right, everyone, homework time. This week, we're doing the Financial Reality Check Challenge.
Pick one financial issue you've been avoiding or worrying about without taking action, whether it's checking account balances, making a budget, or researching insurance options.
Gather the actual information you need to understand the situation, even if it feels scary. You can't solve problems you won't look at.
Then make one small, concrete step toward addressing the issue. Not a complete solution, just one action that moves you forward.
Remember, avoiding financial problems doesn't make them go away, and imagining worst-case scenarios is usually more stressful than dealing with reality.
And don't let shame about money struggles prevent you from getting help or advice when you need it. Most people are dealing with similar challenges.
Before we go, let's check in on our own financial anxieties. Any progress on separating real problems from anxiety spirals?
I actually called my insurance company to understand my new benefits instead of just panicking about hypothetical medical bills. Turns out there are some cost-saving options I didn't know about.
And I started researching skills training programs instead of just reading doom articles about AI job displacement. I found some courses that might actually make me more valuable at work.
And I switched to a cheaper grocery store and started meal planning around sales instead of just standing in the aisles calculating egg prices. I'm still aware of the costs, but I'm not letting them paralyze me.
Look at us, taking practical action instead of just spiraling about money problems.
Who knew that facing reality could be less stressful than avoiding it?
Thanks for listening to What Me Worry. I'm Emily.
I'm Cora.
I'm Gianna.
And I'm Alexander, and I'm going to look at my credit card statements this week.
You've got this, Alexander.
This was an AI scripted voice drama for entertainment and informational purposes only. If you're in crisis or need professional help, please call 988 or contact your local emergency services.
And remember, financial stress is incredibly common right now. You're not failing at life, you're dealing with challenging circumstances.
Facing financial reality is always better than avoiding it, even when the reality isn't what you hoped for.